Welcome back to another episode in the Special Educator Series. I am your host, Tom Hankins, instructor, tutor, consultant, and musician. Our motto is critical thinking with a twist. And let me go over some business here. For those of you that are watching, all our information is in the bottom left of the screen. If you're just listening, our website is tsegrp.org, tsegrp.org. Emailing. If you want to reach out directly to us, host at tsegrp.org. Facebook, X, and Rumble have the same ID at tsegrp. YouTube, little different at tsedgrp. And Instagram, just spell it all out, The Special Educator. Let's get over to the first camera view here. Hi, everybody, sitting there. All of my animated icons at the bottom. If you've seen these before, they're usual. Like, follow, subscribe, notify, ask any questions, or leave comments. Just be aware not every site can be comment enabled simply because of the age policies on some social media. Let's get over to OCam here. On a prior episode on energy technology, I had put forth the perspective that energy resources, in particular nuclear energy, was something that we would have to be looking towards, expansion of it. Everybody that I run into usually thinks of nuclear energy as the 3 Mile Island, the Chernobyl, the very large-scale production facilities. Well, in my prior episode, that's not the case anymore. They have smaller scale and even micro nuclear reactor development going on right now. I had mentioned in that, however, one element that shows promise, and that is thorium. The principle of thorium is it's plentiful, it's safer to use, it requires less material, it's not as highly radioactive as uranium, so as far as disposal, transportation, and safe operation, those are much better. But I want to go into thorium as I had promised. So I had AI prepare a PowerPoint presentation. Now this is just a gloss over. This is here just to put a light bulb in your head. So we're going to start on this with the perspective that thorium is an option when it comes to nuclear energy generation. All right, let's get over to the presentation. So just to go over some of the things here, the question that I had asked was to factor in history, uses, research, and potential use as a fuel source. You're going to find out a little bit of the history of it, and there are other applications for thorium that will come up in this as well. So just take some mental notes, or if you want, write this down. I'm not going to get too deep in any one item here because this is a first pass on thorium for you, if you will. All right, so again, we're going to talk about background, historical backgrounds, uses, research and development, how viable it is as a nuclear resource, present uses, and of course, global deposits and resources. So let's talk about the historical background of thorium. Initially, thorium was a very early discovery in 1828 by a Swedish chemist, Hans Jacob Berzelius. And this discovery was really not intended for energy production at all. In fact, it had other applications. They named it after Thor, the Norse god of thunder. And if you've watched any of the Marvel series, I think we all are aware of what Thor is. And the properties of thorium are what really made it interesting. In particular, its heat resistance. So initially, because of that heat resistance, before electricity came around, they used thorium in the production of gas mantles so that you could have brighter, higher temperature, if you will, lighting. And that would make things more efficient and effective. Obviously, it has, because of heat resistance, certain industrial applications. So these industrial applications are not limited just to something like gas mantles. So anytime, especially high temperature is needed, high temperature resistance, it is very useful. As we get into the 20th century, you're going to find, starting in about the 1950s, 1960s, there was an interest in nuclear applications. Remember in the mid-40s, as we were dealing with the Manhattan Project and using it as not so much an energy source, but as, I'm going to say, a military weapons development, people were very anxious to get off of that and into energy resources. The Navy needed it, obviously, for small nuclear reactors, smaller form reactors for their vessels, for the submarines and ships. So energy production became a major concern. And the alternative to uranium was very attractive because it could be used in a safer, and it was also more abundant element to extract. Let's get over to some of the uses, because we've talked about energy, but there are some other uses of thorium that are quite interesting. We obviously know there's industrial applications. It can be used in ceramics, which is very interesting. Again, anywhere that the high temperature needs are an issue. So, metal products, ceramics, and of course, other manufacturing needs. Now, lighting and electronics does have some use in lighting applications. Again, much like the mantles, the gas mantles, its high temperature resistance really helps in areas where high temperature is a factor. As far as things like superconductors, although those generally are about keeping things very cold, thorium during energy production is very resistant to the temperature. Here, next one. Now, medical uses. Anytime we talk medical uses, let's just understand that modern medical technology relies a lot on radioactive material, lower level radioactive material. And because thorium is a lower level radioactive element, we can find medical applications for cancer treatment and diagnostic imagery and other radiological uses. As far as research and development, beyond its initial discovery, the earliest interest in thorium, as you can imagine, was industrial and eventually into nuclear. The funding came from governments and private industry as well, so it is funded. There's money there for the research, and it's been ongoing almost 3/4 of a decade at this point. And then finally, when we got into exploration and we realized the broader applications, simply because of how much of the ore deposits exist globally, that made things very attractive. Now, most applications are not going to be military in nature now. It is really about power production. And with these new advanced reactors that I mentioned in prior episode, thorium becomes a very central focus for a lot of these smaller reactor applications, where you need high temperature but much higher levels of safety and efficiency. The traditional nuclear fuels are on their way out, folks. This is something that I believe is going to replace what is out there now. So molten salt reactors are really primed for thorium energy production. That is really where I believe this application is going to go, molten salt reactors. The fuel cycle of thorium makes things, once it gets going, very self-sustaining. It doesn't require a lot of additional input. And because of that, you don't need to worry like you would with a typical uranium reactor. There's no core to melt down. There's simply very high temperatures, which are great for energy production. And really the only thing you have to worry about is, because thorium operates at very high temperatures, you need to use materials technology to utilize thorium properly. Now, China and Russia do have thorium reactors, but they're not the scale of what we're talking about, and it hasn't been brought to full use. So let's talk about as a nuclear fuel. What do we already know? We already know that it's a very accessible resource. It is available globally with higher concentrations, which we'll get to in a little bit, in certain countries. And the geological formations being so plentiful makes it very attractive. Lower waste production. First of all, you don't need as much of the material. So whether you transport it, store it in place, or while you're utilizing it, there's far less. There's a reduction in raw material needed. And of course, because of the lower level radioactive nature, you're going to find a much greater safety factor here. Again, in place during production and for transport over land, this is much safer than anything that uranium can come to offer. So now we have to deal with technological, regulatory, and infrastructure needs. What is standing in the way of thorium is its unique properties. It makes it very hard to utilize because of the high temperatures needed. So our technological hurdles are primarily material science, material engineering, chemistry, and physics get highly involved. If we can push those envelopes further, unfortunately, that does require funding, this can become viable. The regulatory framework kind of dovetails into that a little bit because of nature of getting thorium to a usable state and using it safely within a reactor setting. I'm going to bring back, it's all about material sciences. It hasn't been perfected yet, but it's getting there. Finally, infrastructure needs. Once you have developed the technology and you have the regulatory frameworks in place to help get this along, you now have to build. And that infrastructure need is only going to get dealt with when there's a demand. I'd mentioned in the previous video, things like AI, quantum computing, mass data storage, things like that are going to require not only buildings, but it's going to require energy. So they're going to go hand in hand. And I honestly have a feeling that nuclear, in the long run, is where this is going to go. It's going to be, I'm going to say, probably the main focus on energy for these data centers. So the benefits of thorium, as we'd mentioned before, greater safety and less radioactive waste. The drawbacks of uranium are the reverse of that, higher radioactivity and much greater issues when it comes to waste management. Once people understand the differences between thorium and uranium, as a public entity, I believe the sentiments will change. People need to understand this is not the traditional uranium we're talking about here. Now, some of this is going to get a little redundant, but I just want to reinforce it. The present uses of thorium, we obviously discussed industrial and medical, but as far as a fuel, testing and showing the potential is really where we're at right now. I know it started a long time ago, interest was lost, and it's coming back. The real world applications are coming to light, and thorium in and of itself is kind of its own representative, both in a positive and a negative sense. So pilot experiments really focus in on the global thorium deposits. We know it's broadly available. We know it's viable, but it's just, we've got to get there with the technology, and it is a sustainable fuel source. As far as performance, we need to get the data, and we need to discuss, how it can be used within a future energy network, if you will. One of my premises has always been, don't take any energy resource off the table until we get to that viable future energy source, we're going to need to use petroleum hydrocarbons to get to that next level. So the sooner we do it and the more safely we do it, the better off we're going to be. So as far as the regulatory landscape, it's changing all the time, and technology is changing so quickly, so fast. It's tough to stay on top of it. And I think with technologies developing, our safety standards are going to have to evolve along with it. As far as getting regulatory entities to understand the viability, they're going to have to recognize the importance of how their regulatory policies affect the research and development. And as the technology does evolve, it is incumbent upon those doing the research to work with regulators to help them understand the rewards and risks and benefits. The whole risk analysis is going to have to be done. Now, as I'd mentioned, thorium is available globally, but there are some key points to measure when you think about this. The major thorium deposits, number one is India. They have the highest concentration of thorium within their ore. In other words, their ore, the quality of their ore is much higher as far as having being able to get thorium as an element out of it. We are not nearly as high a concentration as India, but we have a lot more territory here in the U.S. Now, Australia is very good as well, and I think we have a very friendly social, political relationship with Australia, and we kind of sit in the middle. If you look at this chart here, this kind of darker tan, that is a mid-level prospect for concentration, both quantity and quality. So we have a lot of territory. We have a great amount of territory here in the United States, but India is really where I think this is going to lie, simply because they have such high concentrations of deposits. So extraction in and of itself, just the raw ore, is not terribly difficult. But you need to understand it's done typically with strip mining. It does have environmental impacts. It's not the only ore we mine with that technique, but we also don't want to make things any worse than they already are. That having been said, we can make advancements in extraction and processing before we get to the actual refining of it. Now, when we get to the refinement process, like I said, its heat resistance makes it very difficult to work with and refine, but technology will help with that. As the technology for extraction and refinement develop, that future viability gets much, much better. So utilization is going to really determine how this goes. The more safely and more abundantly we can utilize thorium, the better the advantages for the globe. For those countries that have either high concentrations or large scale deposits, again, we've already mentioned, India, Australia, and the United States, energy independence becomes a true possibility. And as we know, that goes along with all sorts of other social, political things. I'm not going to get too far into it, but energy independence does add to security at the baseline level. And then global energy markets can be influenced based upon thorium extraction, resources, production, and utilization. So without getting too much further into it, I just want to go with this. Conclusion: thorium is a viable alternative. It has some history with industrial, medical, and energy uses that can be developed. The resources are there, the technology is ever evolving, and the funding is there. Finally, as a future energy solution, it's there. We have it. We can use it. We can make it work. It just requires the right amount of attention. So let me go back here for my finishing comments. My initial premise is that we need more abundant forms of energy. Without getting too technical for you all, the density of energy within a given space is really what it boils down to, energy density. So, for example, as you refine uranium, you get very high energy density for a very small amount. But you have a trade-off. It's very dangerous. Thorium gives you relatively high energy density and a lot safer use. You don't have to worry about core meltdowns. You have to worry about the high temperature, but like I said, material science will hopefully take care of that particular issue. Anyway, getting back to the video, or the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to post it. I'll get some information out there, post it on the websites as much as I can. This video is recorded in advance of release, so I'm probably going to put this out somewhere in maybe second week of February, so hopefully in advance of Valentine's Day. Consider it my Valentine's Day gift to you. Anyway, until such time that I get the next episode out for you, I hope everything is well. I hope this video finds you well and maybe sparks a little bit of interest so that you can speak to something about energy with a little bit more of an informed mind. So when it comes to engagement, look through materials, do a little bit of your own research. Just don't rely on me, and see what you find out. Be curious to have you leave some comments or reach out to me and see what you think. Anyway, until then, I'm Tom Hankins, your instructor, tutor, consultant, and musician. I'm going to bring up the music just a little bit here while we get these out. Last time around, our website, tsegrp.org. Email, host@tsegrp.org. Facebook, X, and Rumble @tsegrp. YouTube @tsedgrp. And Instagram, The Special Educator. Take care, folks. Peace. Love y'all. We'll see you out there.